Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're doing a Lightsworn deck profile. So I'm really excited for you guys because this deck is an amazing classic deck that just got an insane power boost from the list, giving us back Fairy Tale Snow, which is an insanely awesome card in this deck, and giving us back Destrudo, which is going to help us out with our synchro plays. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description in every single video, getting a signed cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron, along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be laying 3 copies of Raiden, Hand of the Lightsworn. This card is an insanely powerful card in this deck and is one of the best starters that has the ability that during your main phase, you can send the top 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard, which is a great thing in this deck because what you're trying to do is send cards from the deck to the graveyard to set up to summon out our crazy awesome boss monster. Once you send those cards to the graveyard, if there's any Lightsworns amongst those cards that were sent to the graveyard, this card gains 200 attack. And it also has the ability that during the end phase, you send the top 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard, which is a mandatory effect on all of your Lightsworn monsters to send cards from the deck to the graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Lumina, Lightsworn Summoner. You're going to be playing her in the deck because she can actually bring your Lightsworns back from the graveyard with the ability to once per turn discard a card and then target a level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster in the graveyard and special summon that target back to the field, which is super helpful, especially comboed with our Raiden, which gets you into a level 7 synchro play or lets you climb into some really awesome link plays. This card also, while it's on the field during the end phase, you send the top 3 cards from your deck to the graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Wolf, which is one of the cards we're trying to send from the deck to the graveyard that has the ability to, if this card is sent from the deck to the graveyard, you can special summon this card back to your side of the field, which is a awesome effect just to be able to special summon Wolf back to your side of the field, and it is chainable to itself, which is really cool. So for example, if you use Raiden's effect to send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and you send 2 copies of Wolf, then you can special summon both of them back to your side of the field, which is super helpful for this deck. We then play a single copy of Felice. Felice is a great tuner for the deck. It has the ability that it can't be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. And it has the ability that if this card is sent to, from the deck to the graveyard by a monster effect, you special summon it. And you contribute this card and then target 1 monster opponent controls, destroy that target, and then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, which is again pretty good because you're trying to mill all the cards that you can with this deck. We're then playing a single copy of Lila. Lila is really helpful at helping or popping back row because it has the ability target spell or trap on the field, change card to defense position, and then destroy the card, but its battle position it cannot change until the end of your next turn, which is not that big of a deal because basically you're just going to need to out maybe 1 back row with this card, but it's super helpful just to be able to pop those back row cards with this card's effect. And it also has the ability that during the end phase you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. We then play a single copy of Minerva. Minerva is really good because when this card is normal summon, you can add a light dragon type monster from your deck to your hand whose level is less than or equal to the total number of Lightsworn monsters with different names in your graveyard. And if this card is sent from the hand or the deck to the graveyard, you send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and then during the end phase you send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard if this card is on the field, which is a super helpful effect to just send 2 cards. I wish it was 3 with her, but it's just 2, but that's still pretty good just to send those cards to the grave. We then play a single copy of Raikou. Raikou is helpful in this deck because he's the only Lightsworn you play, because it has the ability if it's normal summon or flip face up that you can banish a Lightsworn monster from your hand or grave, usually a duplicate name that you have in the graveyard, to be able to banish 1 card on the field, which doesn't target, which is really good in this deck to be able to just not target and out cards that your Judgment Dragon is not going to be able to out. And it has the ability also that once per turn, if another Lightsworn monster effect is activated, you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, which again helps us get those names in the graveyard and helps us special summon wolves. We then play 3 copies of our boss monster, which is Judgment Dragon. This card is one of the most classic, awesome Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the entire game. It can't be normal summon or set. It must be special summoned for your hand by having 4 or more Lightsworn monsters with different names in your graveyard and cannot be special summoned by other ways. And you can pay 1,000 life points to destroy all other cards on the field. And then during each of your end phases, you send the top 4 cards from your deck to the graveyard. Now the really awesome thing is his effect stacks, and it is not once per turn. You can use this effect over and over and over again, which is really cool because you can special summon out the first JD, blow field for 1,000, and then special summon another one, and then your third one, and then go in for 9,000 to end the game. This card is an insanely powerful card to play in this deck, and I highly recommend 3 copies. We then play 3 copies of Starliege. Starliege helps out the deck a lot because this card has the ability that you can send any number of dragon monsters from your hand or face over field to add to the graveyard to be able to add a dragon monster from your deck to your hand, whose level equals the total original levels of the monsters you send to the graveyard. So for example, if I send 2 4s, I can add an 8 from my deck to my hand, which helps out a lot. You can also manage this card from your graveyard and then target a level 8 light or dark dragon monster in the graveyard and add it back to your hand. So if you do mill your copies of Judgment Dragon, you can just get it back with this card, which is pretty helpful. We then play a single copy of Black Dragon Collapse Serpent and a single copy of White Dragon Wyvern Buster. These are basically here because you can banish a light or a dark monster depending on which one you're summoning. If you're summoning the White Dragon, you're going to banish a dark. If you're summoning the Black Dragon, you're going to banish a light. To be able to special summon them to your side of the field is level 4s. And they also have the ability, if they're sent to the graveyard, you can search the opposite one, which is pretty helpful in this build. We then play a single copy of Chaos Dragon Levinair. Chaos Dragon Levinair helps out because it's an additional boss monster that you can banish light or dark monsters from the graveyard to special summon this card, but you have to banish 3, and depending on what you banish depends on the effect that you get. If you banish only light monsters, you can special summon a card from your graveyard. If you banish only dark, you can randomly shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand in the deck. And if you banish light and dark, you can destroy 2 cards on the field, which is very good for this card. We then play a single copy of Trick Clown because if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Perform Mage monster from the graveyard, but its attack and events become 0 and you take 1,000 points of life point damage, which is not that big of a deal because basically you're looking for that level 4 on your field. 1 copy of Damage Juggler because it searches your other copies of your Perform Mages, and then 2 copies of Hat Tricker. Hat Tricker is very, very helpful in this build because Hat Tricker has the ability that if there's 2 or more monsters on the field, which this deck is a swarm deck, you're going to be able to immediately special summon this card to your side of the field, which helps out a lot in this build to be able to just immediately special summon your Hat Tricker to your field when you have 2 more monsters on the field. We then play a single copy of Fairy Tale Snow, which is insane that we got this card back at 1. If this card is normal summon or special summon, you can target 1 monster on your opponent controls, change it to face down defense, basically a walking Book of Moon. And also has the ability that during either player's turn, if this card is in your graveyard, you can manage 7 cards from your hand, field, or grave to special summon this card back to your field, which is a really good effect just to give us an additional level 4. We then play a single copy of Destrudo. I can't believe they actually gave us Destrudo back. That is just really, really good for this deck. Because if this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can pay half your life points, target a level 6 or lower monsters you control, special summon this card, and if you do, this card's level becomes its reduced level of the monster that it targeted. So for example, if you target a 4, you reduce this card's level by 4, always letting you go in for a level 7 synchro, which is really good. And also has the ability that also you place this card on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field, which is totally fine because we can just mill it again. We then play 2 copies of Destiny Hero Malicious. Destiny Hero Malicious is here because basically you can banish a copy of Malicious to special summon another copy of Malicious, and it helps us go for additional synchro and link plays. And for the last 2 monsters, we're playing 2 copies of Plague Spreader. Plague Spreader is really good because it has the ability that if this card's in the graveyard, you can place 1 card from your hand on the top of the deck and special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. This card is really good in the deck because basically you're going to get it back on the field to help you with your link plays. So that's it for the monsters, guys. With Lightsworn, you're going to be playing a lot of monsters and not a lot of spells in the deck, so let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial. This card's get to the exact card that you want in the graveyard when you need it. 1 copy of Monster Reborn, just to help us get back our cards from the graveyard that we might want back on the field. 3 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade. You send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then you can add any Lightsworn that you want from your deck to your hand, which is a great effect. This is also not a once per turn search effect, which is awesome. Then we play 3 copies of Solar Recharge, which I still think, to this day, this card is the most insane draw card in the entire game. You discard any Lightsworn monster to draw 2, and then send the top 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard. That is really good for this archetype, and I absolutely say you gotta play 3 of this card. We then play 3 copies of Chaos Space. Chaos Space searches any of our light or dark monsters that cannot be normal summoned or set by sending a light or dark monster from your hand to the graveyard that is the opposite type. So for example, if you're trying to search your Judgment Dragon, you discard a dark monster to search that copy of Judgment Dragon from your deck to your hand, but it can only search monsters that have a level between 4 and 8, which is kind of an interesting concept because most of our Chaos monsters actually have a level between 4 and 8. It also has a really neat effect effect that if this card is in the graveyard, you can banish it, target one of your banished light or dark monsters that can't be normal summoned or set, and place that monster on the bottom of the deck, and then draw a card, which comes in very, very handy, especially with our Fairy Tale Snow, being able to banish our Judgment Dragons, Chaos Dragon Levinaires, Black and White Dragons, and just getting all those cards banished so Chaos Space can put them back. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Minerva. Minerva is just so good in this deck. I love Minerva, and it's one of the reasons I play this deck besides Judgment Dragon. This card is super good because you just detach a material from this card, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then draw cards equal to the number of Lightsworn monsters sent to the graveyard by this effect. And then if this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then you can destroy cards on the field up to the number of Lightsworn cards sent to the graveyard by this effect, which is really, really a great effect. We then play a single copy of Baron de Fleur. Baron de Fleur is a great synchro monster to play in here. You can change it out if you want to for another level 8, or you can change it out for any other level 10 synchro monster that you want to change this out for if you're looking to have a more budget build. But this card is a really good card to play in the deck if you do have one, because basically it's a walking negate, and once per turn it can destroy a card on the field, which is really, really good. We then play a single copy of Cyframe Lord Omega because it's very easy to summon in this deck, and basically it just rips a card out of your opponent's hand. 1 copy of Chaos Ruler, the Chasmatic Magical Dragon. This card is a great card in the deck, and this card is a awesome card that you're going to always be synchro summoning into, because it has the ability, if this card is synchro summoned, you can excavate the top 5 cards from your deck, and if you do, you get to add 1 light or dark monster that you excavated to your hand, send the rest to the graveyard. So this card is pretty much a Lightsworn monster, except it's not in the name. That's the only thing about this card. And if this card's in the graveyard, you can banish a light and a dark monster from your hand or graveyard, and then special summon this card back from the grave, but banish it when it leaves the field. So this card is an insanely powerful card in this deck, and I highly recommend playing this card at least at 1. We then play a single copy of Beals because this card can live through a Judgment Dragon because it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. 1 copy of Borreload Savage because you're going to be link summoning in this deck a lot, so this card is really good to give you a walking negate. 1 copy of Michael, which is so much easier to go into this deck now, because this card basically with the Strudo is super easy to go into because it just requires a light non-tuner, but it doesn't care what the tuner is, so you can use Strudo to summon this card. You can once per turn pay 1,000 life points, target a card on the field, and banish it, and when this card is destroyed, you can target any number of Lightsworn monsters in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, and if you do, you gain 300 life points for each card returned, and then during each of your end phases, you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, which is pretty good. 1 copy of Riser Dragon because it helps us go into additional synchro plays in the deck, and 1 copy of Coral Dragon for the last synchro monster. The reason I'm playing Coral Dragon because it helps me climb into Baron de Fleur, and it has the ability to once per turn discard a card, target a card your opponent controls, and destroy it, which is really good to be able to just target the exact card that you want to get rid of. We then play a single copy of Appaloosa. Appaloosa is really good because it's easy to put multiple monsters on the field with different names. 1 copy of Curious, which you're always going to be sending Fairy Tale Snow to the graveyard off this card's effect. 1 copy of Crystron Needle Fiber, which is extremely easy to summon in this deck, especially with your copies of Lumina, bringing back your Raidens to your side of the field. 1 copy of the Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, because this card is so easy to go into and can balance your opponent's cards and give you a dragon monster on your side of the field. And then finally, 1 copy of Striker Dragon. You might be looking at Striker Dragon being like, why? But the reason you're playing this card is because if you summon your copy of Black Dragon or White Dragon, you can link them away, summon out this card to your side of the field, and then search the other one that you don't have in your hand, and then banish the one in the graveyard to summon it out to the field, link it away with Striker Dragon, and summon your copy of Heavenly Spheres, which is super good in this deck, just to be able to do that. Now, I will say, for budget options for you guys, if you want to drop the Baron de Fleur, you can play Boral Sword Dragon if you're looking for another rank 4 that'll help you go in for game. If you're looking for a little bit more budget, but not quite so budget, you can drop the Baron de Fleur for an access code talker, because you are playing Dark, Water, Light, and Wind in this deck, which is also very helpful, or a copy of Phoenix to pop spells and traps. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a crazy awesome deck to play with. I love this deck. It's very budget to pick up the main deck because all of your Lightsworn monsters have been printed a million times, especially in common. So this deck is super, super easy to pick up. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.